coming up on At Issue.
You don't do it voluntarily. The federal government is going to make you do it, and a black man is going to make you do it.
Lawsuit rally. The attorney filing suit over the state flag tells the governor take it down or face the consequences.
We're going to have to do something because our situation is so horrible.
Repairs needed. Lawmakers agree there's a problem, but how will the state fund upgrades to transportation infrastructure? And we remember former First Lady Nancy Reagan. At Issue starts right now. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Desiree Frazier, in for Wilson Stribling this week. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how they impact you. And we want to share or know your opinions and comments. Share them with us. Just go to facebook.com/MPB Online News. On Twitter, our handle is at MPB News. Also, visit our webpage, mpbonline.org/issue. And you can check us out, MPB News, and all of your favorite shows on your new MPB app. It's free to download for your Apple or Android phone. The Senate has approved a plan to cut state taxes for individuals and businesses. Senate Bill 2858, also known as the Taxpayer Pay Raise Act, passed by a vote of 39-11. All Republicans and 8 Democrats voted in favor. The $575 million tax relief plan includes removing the 3% and 4% tax bracket, lowering the tax burden on small businesses, and eliminating the franchise tax on business property and capital. This is a similar plan the House voted down last year. We spoke to Senator Hob Bryan and Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves about the bill.
Well, we work really hard behind the scenes on every bill, trying to get large majorities to vote and send the message to the House, and particularly the Democrats in the House. As you know, last year the Democrats in the House unanimously stood up and said, we don't want to send more money back to our taxpayers. And that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense from a policy standpoint. It really doesn't make any sense from a political standpoint either. But maybe it's just a fundamental disagreement on where money comes from. I personally believe that government doesn't have any money, that it does not take away from the individuals who are out earning a living and paying taxes.
None of us are really carried away about having taxes, but unless we have a method of operating vital government services with manna, that's our method of providing education and health care and the basic services that the people expect us to provide.
The bill now goes to the House for consideration. The attorney who filed a federal lawsuit against Governor Bryant over the state flag says it's time to take it down. Carlos Moore was joined by supporters during a press conference about the lawsuit on the steps of the state capitol this week. Moore claims the state flag is state-sanctioned hate speech. He wants a judge to rule the flag unconstitutional and have it taken down. Moore calls the flag a treacherous, insurrectionist emblem that's a relic and vestige of slavery. He says if the flag is ruled unconstitutional, all African Americans in Mississippi would be eligible to collect damages for civil rights violations. Moore tells At Issue he's confident he'll win in court and the flag will be removed.
In Mississippi, historically, it has been the federal courts that have protected our rights. I'm encouraged because we're in federal courts, and I'm encouraged because the judge that will make the initial decision was appointed by President Obama. I'm encouraged that he is a learned jurist, and I'm encouraged that he will follow the Constitution and the law. There will be opposition, but I expect victory. I am 95% certain that flag will come down.
State Attorney General Jim Hood says he will defend the lawsuit despite his belief the flag should be changed. Governor Bryant calls the lawsuit frivolous. All bills seeking to change the state flag died in the legislature this session. Governor Bryant looks to the House to appoint a circuit judge for the Delta. Democratic Representative Linda Coleman will serve as judge in Bolivar, Coahoma, Quitman, and Tunica counties. Coleman is a lawyer and has served in the House for 24 years. She temporarily replaces retiring Judge Johnny Walls. An election will be held in November to decide who will fill the remaining 2 years of the term. A special election will also be held to fill Coleman's House seat. A recent study shows Mississippi needs hundreds of millions of dollars to repair roads and bridges across the state. The only problem, how to fund the plan. Here's MPB's Maura Mode.
Crumbling bridges and roads scattered with potholes. It seems to be a way of life in Mississippi.
For too long, we have neglected our roads and bridges in Mississippi. And so now it's time for us to repair our roads and bridges.
According to the Mississippi Department of Transportation, it will take nearly $3 billion for all repairs and replacements for roads and bridges. There are more than 7,000 miles of state roads in very poor condition. MDOT says that number doubles by the year 2035 at the current funding level.
We have a wonderful highway system, probably one of the best in the country, but the system needs maintaining. We've got to maintain. There are potholes, there are problems, there are bridges, there are issues.
The average age of state bridges is 60 years. More than 1,000 are deficient. Like this bridge in Carroll County. It collapsed last year when a truck heavier than the posted weight restriction drove over it.
Fortunately, nobody was following that vehicle, or they would have been on the bridge when it did collapse. Worst case scenario, imagine if that had been a school bus going across there. But the bottom line is that's a perfect example of if somebody ignores that posted sign of what can happen.
The Mississippi Economic Council, the state's Chamber of Commerce, recently revealed to state lawmakers the result of a task force study on the funding needs for transportation upgrades. It found $375 million would be necessary annually to make the repairs.
No one is shying away from the fact that we have an issue. What we're trying to do is find the right solution to that issue.
It's clear we've got to invest in our infrastructure and maintain it. Just like your house, you can't put off maintenance to your house. And if you do, you're only going to have more expense later. You see what happens in the city of Jackson when you don't keep up with maintenance. The state has a major investment in highways and bridges, and we need to maintain those bridges, and we need to make sure that we're doing that and helping our cities with their streets.
Governor Bryant recommended raising the fuel tax to raise money to fund repairs. The council also recommended increasing the sales tax, increasing vehicle registration fees, establishing toll roads as some of the ways to generate the millions of dollars needed.
I would probably have a hard time. I don't believe that my constituents in my county would be in favor of a tax increase. There's no doubt something has to be done. Now, which plan we can agree on to actually begin a maintenance program, an aggressive maintenance program on our roads and bridges, that we'll just have to come to the table with it.
Legislators we spoke with agree there should be a focus on fixing the problem, but how to fund it is still up in the air.
We can't get it out of the general funds. It's not there. We're not going to be able to get it from the federal government because the federal government does not have it. The local government does not have it. So the only thing that we can do is the state has to take the leadership role in coming up with new funding in order to make that happen.
Senator Willie Simmons is chairman of the Senate Highways and Transportation Committee.
We're going to have to do something because our situation is so horrible. We're going to have a nightmare where we have a bus or an emergency vehicle or some other family member vehicle that falls into a bridge that's collapsed as a result of a damaged structure that's been posted, and someone crossing that posted bridge not paying attention to what they're doing and do more damage to it, and all of a sudden we have a bad situation. We are very, very serious about taking a look at it, and we don't know until the fat lady sings or we sign it down what's going to take place, but you can be assured that we are very concerned about it and we're going to be looking at it real close.
Maura Mode, MPB News.
The House killed a bill which would have used more than $50 million of BP oil spill settlement money to repair roads and bridges. House Bill 1386 originally passed by a wide margin, but it was held on debate over what area of the state the money should go to. Well, let's dive into the reporter's notebook now. Joining us is Emily Wagster Pettis. She is the Mississippi State House and political reporter for the Associated Press, and she's filling in for Paul Boger this week. Good to see you, Emily.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Slow week at the Capitol, right?
It was a slow week, especially compared to the two previous weeks when they were dealing with literally hundreds of bills in the House and Senate. This week was kind of a time to reset. The biggest news of the week, I think, was the tax cut bill out of the Senate.
$575 million franchise cut. How does that bode for the state?
Sure. So it's a long-term plan. It would phase out 3 different types of taxes over a period of 15 years. There's the franchise tax, which is a big promise that Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves made in his bid for re-election last year. It would also eliminate over a period of time both the 3% and the 4% income tax brackets, and it would also give a tax break for people who are self-employed. And so depending on the amount of economic growth over that time period, we're looking at a plan that would remove from the state revenue stream and the tax collections anywhere from about $575 million to $800 million. This is roughly 10% of the state revenue.
Is there any talk about how to make up that money?
Yes, the people who are proposing and supporting this plan say that economic growth would make up for the loss, because if you let people keep more of their own money, then they will spend the money and that will generate economic activity.
In the short term, what does it mean for the budget? Because we already have a budget shortfall.
Yes, there is a budget shortfall in the current year, and state economic growth is sluggish at this point, so they're not optimistic that there's going to be a big increase in revenue for next year. Lieutenant Governor Reeves's argument is that you don't make a long-term decision about taxes based on just the short-term reality of where the budget is at any given point in time, because things can go up and down.
What do you think about the possibility of it passing?
You know, I think actually it might face some difficulty in the House. The House budget writers at this point have put provisions into every early version of the budget bills that if there is a reduction in revenue, there has to be a proportional corresponding across-the-board cut for state spending. And so this is something that could affect everything from, big ticket items like public education and health to smaller agencies.
So we'll have to see how this plays out.
Yes.
All right. Moving on, Carlos Moore, attorney out of Greenwood, or rather Grenada, suing Governor Bryant over the state flag, wants it changed.
Yes, he filed a federal lawsuit, and the state has not yet filed its response. But as was noted earlier in the program, Attorney General Jim Hood, is going to be filing a response on behalf of the state. And so what Carlos Moore is saying in his lawsuit is that he contends the flag is a vestige of slavery and is therefore unconstitutional.
And there was a press conference this week on the Capitol steps. He brought in Justin Bamberg, a South Carolina representative who argued in that state to remove the flag with the Confederate emblem in their state from the Capitol grounds.
That's right. In South Carolina, they were not dealing with a state flag. They were dealing with a standalone kind of rebel flag that for years and years had flown. It used to fly on top of the State House building. And then about 15 years ago, they moved it to a flagpole on the State House grounds. And it, even on top of the building or on the State House grounds, it had been kind of a very divisive issue over there in South Carolina for a long time. So after the attack at the church in Charleston, where 9 people were killed last summer, the legislature had a bipartisan agreement, and it was signed into law by Republican Governor Nikki Haley to remove that flag from the State House grounds. And so what Representative Bamberg, who is a Democrat, said over here in Mississippi is, if Mississippi's Republican governor needs to find a role model, he could look toward Republican Nikki Haley over in South Carolina.
And quite a show of support on the Capitol steps.
Yeah, there were a couple hundred people out there, and this was the 3rd rally this session dealing with the flag. 2 of them have been Change the Flag rallies, and then there was a Keep the Flag rally back in January, and that one was attended by Sons of Confederate Veterans and a number of other people.
Let's move on to Linda Coleman.
Yes.
Being appointed circuit court judge.
Representative Coleman is well respected at the Capitol. She's been in the House since 1992. She's an attorney from Mound Bayou, and she's well liked by her colleagues. She's very smart, and she has a good way of getting along with people. And I saw all sorts of colleagues going up and congratulating her, Republicans, Democrats, all telling her they think that she'll do a great job.
Okay. And coming up next week, what can we expect?
So next week, I think we're going to see some action from the Senate to move early versions of the budget bills, just as the House did this week. Each chamber has part of the budget, and so they pass the kind of placeholder bills and send it to the other chamber. So the Senate will be tossing some bills over to the House.
Emily Wagner Pettis, thank you so much.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton came out on top as voters in Mississippi went to the polls this week to cast ballots in the state's presidential primary, as well as other races. First to the Republicans. Donald Trump took first place with 47% of the vote, as well as 24 state delegates. Ted Cruz was second with 36% and receives 13 delegates. John Kasich was third. Rubio was fourth. Overall, Donald Trump still holds the lead over all Republican candidates on delegate count. Ted Cruz is about 100 delegates behind in second place. Marco Rubio is third. 1,237 delegates are needed to win the Republican nomination. Over on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton solidified her Southern strength by taking Mississippi with 83% of the vote. She also receives 33 of the state's delegates. Bernie Sanders receives 16% of the vote and 5 delegates. Nationally, Clinton has a strong lead over Sanders with double the delegate count, 2,383. Delegates are needed to win, or rather that number is needed to win the Democratic nomination. In Mississippi's 1st Congressional District, incumbent Republican Trent Kelly defeated challenger Paul Cleaver 89% to 11%. In the 3rd Congressional District on the GOP side, incumbent Greg Harper defeated Jimmy Giles 89% to 11%. And on the Democratic side in the 3rd District, Dennis Quinn beat Nathan Stewart 66% to 34%. Quinn will take on Congressman Harper for the seat later this year. And in the race for the District 25 state Senate seat vacated by Will Longwitz, Walter Michel narrowly defeated Bill Billingsley 51% to 49%. Michel is a businessman who previously served in both the House and Senate. Longwitz was appointed judge in Madison County in January, and the 25th districts cover parts of Hinds and Madison counties. We said goodbye this week to Nancy Reagan, who passed away. The former First Lady was 94 years old. The First Lady visited Mississippi many times during the early 80s. Here's Nancy Reagan with President Reagan when the two attended the Neshoba County Fair in 1980. And Mrs. Reagan from 1981 when she christened a new destroyer at Ingalls Shipbuilding in Gulfport. Governor Bryant said, quote, Nancy Reagan was the perfect example of charm and caring that embodies the term First Lady, unquote. State GOP Chairman Joe Nosip says, quote, Mrs. Reagan will always be remembered for her service to our country and her loyal devotion to her husband and our president, unquote. Well, let's get straight to the point with views from both sides of the aisle now. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Lucian Smith is filling in for Austin Barber this week. He's an attorney and was a Republican candidate for state treasurer in 2011. He's also the former chief of staff for Governor Bryant. He is currently with the law firm of Balch and Bingham. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks.
Let's start out by talking a little bit about Nancy Reagan, 94 years old, very well liked.
Yeah, no doubt. A beloved figure and liked very well here in Mississippi.
Just an extraordinary woman. I think people had so much respect for her and because she had so much class, so much grace, and that's the reason I think Republicans and Democrats both just held her in very high regard, irrespective of what some of them may have thought of her husband's policies.
Her funeral is today, and obviously, it's going to be quite a pomp and circumstance affair, and understand that she planned her funeral well in advance, as is done with all presidents and first ladies.
My understanding is they read a love letter from President Reagan to her as part of it, which is sort of a testament to that special love the two of them had.
Yeah, and the Reagan family still looms large. I think that you see each election cycle, Republican candidates in particular, trying to align themselves with the Reagans in some way or another. So as a Democrat and somebody who kind of follows the local scene or the modern scene, I'm not sure that President Reagan could get elected by his own party anymore, but he still is a big figure, and Nancy was part of that.
On that note, we'll move on. Mississippi primary this past Tuesday.
Yeah, big news.
Yes, the outcome, what'd you think?
Well, Hillary Clinton got one step closer to the nomination, an overwhelming victory, much as we saw in South Carolina, Alabama, and other parts of the South. But more than that, the margin of victory is really starting to loom large. Sanders is clearly going to try to take this thing all the way to the end, but the delegate math just really doesn't work out. Despite winning in Michigan on that same night, Hillary still came out with a larger delegate count by virtue of her big win in Mississippi. And so Mississippi loomed pretty large in the primary and set her closer on her path to the nomination.
I'll say, as a Republican looking at the Democratic results, my hope is that the upset in Michigan, where Hillary lost, is a sign that there's some softness there. She's got some vulnerability, and there may not be the level of enthusiasm among Democratic voters that the Democrats might hope for.
Well, it's worth noting, Lucian, going into the vote, polls showed Hillary Clinton up 20% and then was defeated. It's the biggest loss based on how polling was going into the event that we've had, I think, in some 25 years. And the question really is, will the polling in Illinois, places like Illinois and Ohio, hold up? Because if Sanders were to win those states, which are winner take all, then that would be the caveat to what I said earlier. That would be a very different picture. But right now, again, Clinton up 20 points or so in both of those states.
An exciting week for Trump supporters. He came out on top in the Republican primary. Ted Cruz was here. Madison High School, jam-packed, football field full.
He is. Donald Trump has certainly energized a lot of people who hadn't been engaged in the political process. You know, I think his results here are consistent with what we've seen in other states, about what we expected. I will say, while he is bringing a lot of people to the Republican Party, and I think he would still be a better president than either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton in the fall, and I'm hopeful that the sort of careless rhetoric that he's made a habit of using is something that he'll stop using if he's our nominee, and I certainly hope it's not policy he'll push as president. But he is bringing a lot of people out and getting them engaged in the political process who weren't before. I mean, we had a record turnout on the Republican side.
I bet back at Thanksgiving, you never thought you'd have to say something nice about Donald Trump on statewide TV in March.
I will say I still think he would be a superior president to anybody the Democrats are going to put up, because he's going to surround himself with conservatives, and he's going to advocate for good conservative policy that'll move America forward.
You know, I think he shuffled the board. Conservative is, of course, a brand that Republicans have carried for many years. It's something that we talk about each election cycle. You get beat over the head with it if you're a Democrat, and sometimes even among parties, it's a fight in a primary for who's the most conservative. He certainly shifted that a little bit by taking points that really aren't classically even in that conversation. But I think as an observer from the outside, it's noticeable. He gets 50%, and then Cruz gets 40%. And these are two what I would consider to be kind of far-right candidates. And so the party primary is really taking place over in the far-right section of this party, which really makes it difficult for moderates, I think, in the Republican Party to find their footing. I know Kasich is someone that some of our own local leaders and officials and movers and shakers have backed. Man, 8%.
I want to squeeze in one more topic.
Yeah.
The $575 million franchise tax cut.
Dumpster fire. It's unbelievable.
We
saw this happen in Kansas and Louisiana, nearly drove those states into just abject bankruptcy. It's wrong-headed. I mean, we're talking about 10% of our state revenue. That's right. But there are a couple things I want to say about this. Of the 150 largest and most profitable for-profit companies doing business in Mississippi, 100 of them don't pay corporate income tax. Shocking. And then when you look at the people who would be affected by this franchise tax, we're talking manufacturing, utilities. These are not mom and pop businesses. I think this little kind of sleight of hand 3 and 4% individual income tax thing, that is such a small portion of that number you just mentioned. This is to help corporate sponsors of these Republican candidates.
I think that's exactly wrong. I mean, you're right that not all of the people who are going to benefit from the franchise tax are mom and pop businesses, but the people who are going to be employed by the new companies we're able to bring in as a result of getting rid of an anti-competitive tax. I mean, those are mothers and fathers who have children, and when we start having more people employed, that's going to result in higher taxes getting paid because we got more people employed, and it's ultimately going to improve the health of Mississippi's economy. So I think it's a wonderful thing that we're eliminating an anti-competitive tax that makes it difficult for Mississippi to recruit businesses here.
It may be some type of economic string theory. I don't understand how a tax break for a German company helps spur growth in DeSoto County, but maybe it's out there. I think if we want to do something serious about taxes to help real people, we have a regressive food tax, grocery tax. It's the highest in the country. It's paid by everyone, and it's completely regressive. If you really want to give the common person a little bit extra pocket change, a little bit extra money to provide for their families, that's a great tax to look at.
And another good way to do that is to decrease the amount of income taxes that working people are paying, and that's exactly what the bill passed by the Senate would do.
In the last 30 seconds, how can you cut taxes and still come up with a balanced budget?
Well, I think you do it the way it was done here. I mean, you've got a 15-year phase-in, and so we've got time for economic growth, and the result of having all that capital back in the economy that'll help solve that problem.
Well, look, the biggest problem facing our state right now are devastation and roads and bridges. We have got to get those things bolstered so we don't have something like what happened in Minnesota. Our classrooms need more money. Look, we have basic services that are not being accounted for right now. And so the idea that we would cut 10% of our state budget at a time like this, I think is reckless.
Well, gentlemen, we are out of time, and we thank you so much for being with us. Please join us again next Friday night for MPB, another edition of At Issue.